It's a pretty late hour and it's been a long time, but I am back, and I'm back because of a very important reason to me, which is that the 9/11 narrative that's been put forward for several years, that it was five individuals who were arrested in East Rutherford, New Jersey on 9/11 and were all Israeli citizens. Um, that's being represented again by people with further reach than before as the true story of 9/11. Um, and then along with that, there is this other myth that is somewhat related called the art student's myth. So, if you don't know, I may have shared this already a few months ago. I certainly shared it on my Substack. I don't think I really talked about it on my YouTube, but I am writing a book right now about that whole saga, as well as the issue of the 9/11 hoax myths and Israel, which are in many cases deliberately proliferated by people, um, specifically in order to, uh, in order to demonize, first of all, um, Israel and Zionism and Jews. And look, I'm a First Amendment absolutist, but second of all, um, they're harnessing the angst and anger of a whole generation of people over what failures and suffering has been wrought by the global war on terror. So when I talk about this subject, it's not out of some jingoistic nonsense that other people do, where they say, oh, this is only anti Semitism, or this is simply people who are terrorist supporters. No, I think that it's a more deep problem, and I definitely have a lot in common in terms of my background and my opinions with some of the people who believe in this. But unlike them, I did look into the material, and sadly, a lot of them simply are taking advantage of this new fad in um, in internet influencer um, culture, where you can take historical events and use revisionist history to put a new spin on it, and then you say, well, I'm going against the grain, I'm challenging the official narrative. Yeah, you're challenging the official narrative. You're putting forward a narrative that's just as false, perhaps even more false than theirs. And it's really sad to me that the genuine anti war feelings of so many people over the past quarter century as a result of 9/11 are being perverted by people like Ian Carroll and his ilk. And before I get into the material, I don't really know much about Ian Carroll, and it doesn't really interest me what his motivations are for putting out the tweet that went viral where he ratioed Elon Musk. He's entitled to believe whatever he wants and hold whatever opinion he has. It's perfectly okay for people um, hold heterodox opinions. I don't believe in consensus, social opinion, and groupthink. Um, so I don't think that he has to conform. But what I won't apologize for, what I won't accept on his part, is the lying, and that's the real problem. Like he says, people will accuse me of all sorts of things, but not lying. Well, I am accusing Ian Carroll of lying, and they're not original lies. These are lies that he's repeating, and he actually cites a person who I debated several years ago in giving his source for the lies. Um, Ian Carroll wrote a long post. I'll try to pull up. I'll pull it up before I show it on screen. So, 1 second. I want to make sure that I get the whole display. I don't have the best setup anymore, so you'll have to bear with me. Not that I was exactly dealing with the best setup before anyway. Let me just show you his tweet real quick. And I only focus on two different paragraphs in it because the rest of it would I mean, it's certainly relevant stuff and it's interesting, but it's not my specialty. Uh, um, they are things that I know about, but I've really gone in deep on the 9/11 aspect of what Ian Carroll is talking about. But he talks about AIPAC, he talks about Jeffrey Epstein, he talks about the Apollo affair, which is actually a very interesting story. Um, he talks about the pre-independence armed groups in the British Mandate of Palestine that would be considered terror groups. Talks about bombing refugee camps. And look, I mean, I'm an open. I'm open to people having very different perspectives on life than me. So I don't think anything that Ian Carroll wrote should be censored. And would never support what Elon Musk has been doing in terms of removing blue check marks and things like that. So spare me any outrage about me being a gatekeeper and advocating for censorship. I call my blog, my newsletter, whatever you want to call it, the Jewish Alliance for the First Amendment. And I'm going to stand by that. I'm not going to change my spots. But what he does do is write these two paragraphs, and he says, "We are told Israel is our greatest allies, so why would they have had..." I actually address these in reverse order, but the first one is saying, why would they have had a massive spy network targeting U.S. government agencies leading up to September 11th, 2001? Let me see if there's any. 1 second. So I just wanted to see if the chat's working. See the Israeli art students DA report for copious evidence of Israeli surveillance all across the continental U.S. This is an official government report that cites hundreds of incidents of observed Israeli surveillance teams documented by U.S. government agents all across the continental U.S. The next paragraph is about the dancing Israelis, but he doesn't call it that, which is fine because that really is a misnomer. And he says, and we still have received zero answers why there were numerous fake Israeli moving companies positioned all across the eastern seaboard leading into September 11th, 2001. We have multiple eyewitness reports, as well as hard photographic evidence that they knew the attacks were coming at least a day before they did, and that they were positioned at a vantage point to photograph the attack up to a half hour before the first plane hit. That is false. And I go into it. And look, he has his own areas where he focuses on it. But in terms of them being on scene the day before and the hard photographic evidence, that is not true. Okay, so the people that he's talking about, who are popularly called the dancing Israelis, You can call them the Jersey Five, as I call them in some places. They were arrested in East Rutherford, New Jersey, because they were suspiciously seen only a couple hours earlier in Union City nearby, uh, behaving in a very inappropriate manner during the 9/11 attacks. But they weren't there, as far as we know, prior to American Airlines Flight 11 crashing into the North Tower, which was the first plane to hit a target on 9/11. Now, some people claim that they were, but there's no evidence of it, and I'll explain why there's no evidence of it. But their names are out there; it's been published, um, and I'm not going to repeat it, but it is in the article, so um, I'm not censoring anything, and I'm not holding back. But enough people have already said their names, and it's not going to make a difference if I say it or not. Um, so some of them had been to the Doric Towers in Union City during the previous week. In fact, I think there was one or two of them that had been there the day before 9/11, but they didn't get photographed there the day before 9/11. And then one of them, Omer Marmari, supposedly was carrying a Canon film camera at the time of the arrest, and the developed photos included some taken with the timestamp of September 10th, as is seen in the photo of one of the suspects below flicking a cigarette lighter. So, to summarize, that's what people say. Well, the timestamp says September 10th, so obviously they were there the day before. Um, but it isn't true, and the reason we know it's not true, or at least that the FBI report, which Ian Carroll points you to, um, even says that it isn't true, is because on September 20th, 2001, there was a police inspection of the camera at 10:03 a.m., in which the officer notices that the internal clock of the camera was reading 7:22 p.m. on September 19th, 2001. So this meant that the camera clock was slow, meaning that would show on September 11th that, in the morning, that um, it was the previous day. And that's the way things were back then. I'm not sure the way, I don't own a film camera anymore, and I don't own any of these new digital cameras. I'm sure some of them are set up with a clock that is connected to the network, and so it keeps it synchronized with um, your appropriate world clock, or but back then it was not that way. You had to program your device, and so this guy had this camera that he hadn't programmed, and it was showing the day before. And it's very simple. This isn't some sort of complicated exercise, and I actually link to the page of the report where this is mentioned, and I showed a screenshot. And then the other piece of evidence that Ian Carroll is omitting. Um, I'm just checking the chat real quick. Okay, if anybody has any questions, I know this is a late hour, but you can always ask me. I'm going to get to what I'm working on later. Um, but here's some issues that contradict the narrative about prior knowledge and the idea that they were waiting before the attacks to take a photo of them. You can see the photos here in this inset. This actually comes from an article by Whitney Webb, who certainly is a person that believes that these were intelligence agents. She was writing for Mint Press News. She's a deeply anti-Israel journalist who, she does have a lot of ears that are pointed to her, and people that are they take her very seriously because she wrote a couple books on the Jeffrey Epstein saga. But you can see from the photos that the quality was not especially good, and there's a reason for that. It's because it wasn't taken at the Doric Towers where they were cited by the witness. It was taken apparently at their place of work on West 18th Street in Weehawken, New Jersey, and they'd climbed onto the rooftop after Flight 11 crashed into the North Tower, and they took a couple photos. Certainly don't seem to be very somber photos here. I mean, these people were behaving like buffoons, and it could be that they were excited because this was, I don't know, maybe they were having a boring time in the States. Or if you want to believe it, maybe they were intelligence agents that decided to climb up on a rooftop and act like fools. But they climbed onto the warehouse rooftop first, and the photo evidence shows that. And what it also shows is that they didn't have a very good view of it. There's an elevated roadway, so that obscures part of the Manhattan skyline, and then there's also buildings in the background that obstruct the view of Manhattan. So what did they do? They ended up um, driving the 5 minutes from their warehouse to the Doric Towers, where some of them knew that there was a better vantage point of Manhattan, and then they ended up taking um, some of these other. I don't even know if this is from the Doric Towers, but they ended up taking other photos that were a little clearer, but still, um, the big question that I would have. Okay, this isn't going to be that long of a live stream, but if any of you out there believe in the dancing Israelis explanation for 9/11, I want to know what value this type of photo has. Okay, I mean, you can't really see anything. I can't see the Twin Towers from here, even if you could, uh, partially obscured. You take a photo plus two people in the foreground of the photo. What are you really seeing? And there were people like Ryan Dawson who have alleged, based again on the eyewitness testimony, which obviously means something, but it doesn't. It's not conclusive, right? So the eyewitness said, well, this guy had a video camera. It wasn't a film camera. Well, I'm sorry, but no video camera was ever recovered. So these people who are saying, well, this isn't the action. These photos are just the incriminating evidence. The real job they had was to film the attack. Well, we don't know that because we've only heard witnesses who said that they had a video camera. If there was a video camera, it was never recovered by the police. Nobody's seen it since that day. The suspects themselves denied that they had a video camera. Other witnesses who knew them and were interviewed by the FBI, not witnesses to the event, but people that um, knew them, said that, well, they didn't own a video camera. Now, you could say it's just cover, but the fact is that there is no proof that it existed besides these eyewitness statements, which are useless if they didn't indeed have it when they were arrested and it's not been recovered. So it's a red herring. Um, anyway, so the second issue is this art student ring. Um, Now, again, I'd rather you guys read the article, but I'll summarize it. Ian Carroll referenced this DEA report, and he talked about how there were all of these Mossad agents in different cities across the country. First of all, um, to conclude that there were Mossad agents is to jump to a conclusion. Nobody ever admitted to being an agent of the Mossad, And the reason that this thing happened was because the individuals that were quote unquote art students, they had been really art sellers going door to door in the US. So in some cases, they were people who visited businesses in the Tampa area, in I believe either Phoenix or Santa Fe. Certainly, there were a number of cases in Florida. There were cases in Georgia where these people were seen or at least admitted that they had visited later when they were arrested. And um, in many of these cases, they had solicited at federal properties or even the residences of federal law enforcement employees of the DEA or the Federal Protection Service. But the long story short is this, okay? So they were accused of spying on DEA agents because they went several times to DEA offices um, in a number of cities, okay? And that attracted the suspicion of these DEA agents, and then they were reported to the Immigration and Naturalization Service, which is what ICE used to be called, and they were arrested and uh, not charged with espionage, but rather with crimes related to their immigration status because they were tourists who were working without a permit. So, um, right off the bat, so bad cover. These were people who straight up went into these facilities and tried to solicit for people to buy their art. Secondly, these were people who represented themselves plainly as Israeli citizens and said that they were enrolled at the Bezalel Institute of Art or at other universities in order to throw off the scent that they were here illegally, and these flimsy alibis that they had as far as why they were in the U.S. and everything they're not indicators that they were guilty. They're indicators that they were amateurs at whatever they were doing, and therefore it's really absurd to imply that these people who were arrested several months before 9/11 and deported had anything to do with the attacks. And several sources have tried to say, well, one of the Israeli art students had actually lived next door to Mohammed Atta and another 9/11 hijacker. Well, also not true. In fact, they were deported prior to that. So they were deported in the beginning of April 2001, and Mohammed Atta and Marwan al-Shehi moved into a Hollywood, Florida apartment shortly after that. So the report doesn't contain any evidence whatsoever, nor reference to um, surveillance of terrorists by these individuals. Nothing. And the chronology of their stay in America would suggest that they did not have people in place when Mohammed Atta was moving or when he was back in Atlanta. So, this is definitely something where I would say read the actual report. Does it say what you think it really means? Because if it doesn't say what you think it means, then it's useless to asserting the guilt of these suspects. So, I am going to be working much, much more on this, and I hope eventually that I'll be able to garner enough attention for it because this is really a topic that I've dedicated a lot of time to because I care about it. I care about 9/11 as an event of my generation's coming of age, uh, America changed for us did not change for the better. The unity that was there the first few days did not last. And, we got into these wars that were a terrible failure from the get go. And so many of us were formed by these events. That does not mean that we should believe. You don't have to like who I am. You don't have to like where I come from. But I don't think that we should define this event based on falsehoods, provable falsehoods, by Ian Carroll, by Ryan Dawson, by any of the other 9/11 theorists like Webb Tarpley or Christopher Ballin. These people have had their chances to prove their theories, and they failed miserably. So I'm here to continue fighting this fight based on the evidence and not based on epithets that you throw at one side or the other. They call you one thing, you call them the other thing. If you read the sources, the evidence actually points towards being not guilty. That's about it for today. Please like, share, and subscribe. Find me on all the different social media and video hosting sites, including Rumble, BitChute, and Odyssey. My Substack newsletter is also there. This is in the link tree in the description, as is my Subscribe Star if you want to tip me. And have a great night. Let me just check the chat real quick. Okay, there was one guy. Alright. Have a great night and take it easy.